Shall I share now, right?
Please do so. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ryan Suter. I'm one of the senior investment managers here at Sharewise, and we're here with Steven Lydeamore, who's the CEO of Immuron. Now, Steven's been kind enough to lend us his time this morning to give us a presentation of Immuron and just a bit of an update on how the company's tracking. I will also be doing a Q&A after the presentation. So, participants, ladies and gentlemen, please feel free to submit any questions you'd like me to ask Steven through the Q&A function of Zoom. Obviously, I'll have a couple of questions to kick us off, but then after that, I will ask your questions. Steven, the presentation is all yours.
Very good. Thank you, Ryan, and welcome everybody today. For those of you that aren't familiar, we're not only listed on the Australian Stock Exchange under the ticker IMC, we're also listed on NASDAQ, IMRN. I'll just quickly flick through the safe harbor statement.
Steven, if you just want to change the display settings,
okay,
just so that the presentation is,
this one?
There we go, that's better.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Good. Very good, thank you. Look, quick overview for those that aren't familiar with the company. So we are a commercially available product, Travelan and Protectin. Protectin is only sold in Australia, but Travelan sold in Australia, US, and Canada. And I'll talk a little bit more about the strong growth that we've been experiencing with Travelan. We also have 3 therapeutics in 4 clinical programs. So IMM 124E, which is Travelan, is in phase 2, just completed a controlled human infection model study, phase 2 study. Top line results were released in March, and we're presently have done a soft lock on that, doing a QA review with a plan to have the statistics and release the rest of the data by end of July. That same product, Travelan, is being run in a phase 4 field study by the Uniformed Services University in the US. This is in both the US and UK military personnel actually traveling in deployment to high-risk regions. So very large study, 866 subjects. And you can see in the business update there below that we're up to 75% recruitment of that 866 target. CAMP ETEC is another therapeutic program. So this is Campylobacter, and ETEC is enterotoxigenic E. coli. That's also recently completed phase 2 dosing. So we've done a soft lock on that as well, and that's also under QA review with a view to releasing top-line data from that in August. And the third one there, IMM 529, we just made an announcement recently about that product. We're hoping to go into phase 2 next year. We've just filed pre-IND. That's a pre-investigational new drug application with the FDA, asking for a meeting to discuss phase 2 protocols for that trial we'd like to run next year. And with the Travelan, you can see that we're having a great year. So last year we did 1.8 million in sales, and that was up some 136% on the prior year. And in the current year, 9 months to March, we're up 154% to 3.6 million. And I'll show a graph showing where that's tracking. We don't have the final reconciled numbers for June yet. They'll probably be released around mid to later in July after we complete the financial accounts. We're also looking to enter into international markets, so actively looking at the UK market and specifically Amazon UK on the back of a successful launch on Amazon in the US market. And we're looking at adding another product to the portfolio, and I expect to speak more about that in the next quarter or so. So quickly looking at the financial snapshot, you'll see that we're roughly Australian $20 million market cap per stock, and as of December, we had $15 million in cash, so relatively low enterprise value. We'll update that cash figure as of June when we release our financial results in late August. And of our shareholders, roughly 1/3 of those are based in the US. So that's the BNY Mellon that you can see there are major shareholders. They hold the American shares that one Immuron share is 40 of those make one ADS, and so 2/3 of the stock is held by Australian shareholders, and we have no substantial shareholders, nobody with greater than 5%. The largest shareholders are Authentics with 2.4%, Grand Lodge, which is a company owned by former directors, the Anastasio family, and management and board at the moment hold 0.9%, and that's because a couple of long-standing directors recently retired from the board, and we've got a couple of new people on, so exciting times ahead. Just quickly on our technology platform, I read what people write about the company, and some people think it's just colostrum, and while colostrum is very good for you, it's healthy in of itself. Our technology involves developing specific vaccines for the cow for targeted pathogens, and in the case of Travelan, that's 13 different types of enterotoxigenic E. coli. So each cow will get one of either two vaccines covering those 13 different strains of E. coli. And this is what causes the cow to produce antibodies against that targeted pathogen. And that's what we call hyperimmune antibody-rich bovine colostrum. So we take that colostrum with those antibodies, and we spray dry it in a process to produce a powder that we turn into a tablet. And the great thing about this tablet is that it's not an antibiotic, it has no antimicrobial resistance, and it clears the targeted pathogen from the gut at its source and neutralizes it. So it has label claims you can see here in Australia. We have similar claims in Canada for both reduction and relief of travelers' diarrhea. And unfortunately, in the US, we can't make these same claims because it's sold as a dietary supplement. And so we have that disclaimer there. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration, but we do plan to do that. And that's the whole point of the phase 2 study and the planned phase 3 studies for Travelan, to get Travelan approved as a drug in the US market. So we'll be able to get label claims and promote directly to healthcare practitioners and get scripts and reimbursement and all those good things. These diagrams show you how it works in action, if you like. So bottom left, you can see, without Travelan, you can see the bacteria here. So this is a electron microscope photograph down at a very minute level, showing how these bacteria attach to the gut wall and cause problems. With Travelan, you can see that they're agglutinated there and they're neutralized, and that's essentially how the product works. Look, let's have a look at the status of each of these clinical programs. So IMM 124E Travelan, as I mentioned, just completed phase 2. We'll have those final results at the end of July, and importantly, the clinical study report in August. That report is required to request that end of phase 2 meeting with the FDA. We will discuss protocols and plans for phase 3 studies, which we plan to run next calendar year. Clostridioides difficile, we just filed that pre-IND submission with the FDA on the 1st of July 2024, so relatively new there. We've been making a clinical trial product recently ahead of having that pre-IND meeting with the FDA, and we're hoping to get that phase 2 trial up and running next calendar year as well. I mentioned before the Uniform Services University study with Travelan, so it's called P2TD, so it's a placebo-controlled trial of Travelan in active US and UK military personnel. More than 75% now have been recruited of that target 866 patients. Anticipated top-line results for that, also relatively soon in the first quarter of next calendar year. And CAMP-ETEC, very close to getting the data, first data, top-line data on that. It will be in August. So the soft lock's been completed. They're doing the QA review. Following completion of that, they'll do the statistics, and we'll release those top-line results. So everybody's looking forward to that. Very exciting time for the company. And why are we excited about these therapeutic programs? So, look, gut-mediated pathogens are a billion-dollar market. Since COVID has been completed, there's significant tailwinds pushing the stock higher and higher. And we know from Centres of Disease Control that 30 to 70% of travellers experience traveller's diarrhoea. And of course, none of us really want that. And there is no approved drug for prevention of traveller's diarrhoea. And that's why the Department of Defence is so interested in our technology. They've been trying for years to develop vaccines for humans to stop this. It doesn't work. And so they're trying the approach that we have. And through their funding, we've done preclinical research and most recently these phase 2 studies showing that the product does in fact do what it's supposed to do. It does prevent travellers' diarrhoea. I mentioned the strong growth of Travelan, and I'll get onto the numbers in the next slide, but most of that's coming from Australia. And what we'd really like to do is get up and running in the US and European markets. So you can see in the US market alone that there's a potential of $83 million in annual revenue from selling the product as it is without FDA approval. And that's based on those 60 million odd Americans that travel to these high-risk regions. And of those that are looking for a product, if we get 15% of them, that's equal to about $83 million. And we are in the US market. We launched on Amazon and Walmart.com recently, and hoping to report good full-year results for that. Should come close to a record year in the US, maybe even exceeding it, don't know yet. So let's watch this space on that. I have a great guy, Flavio Palumbo, who's our Chief Commercial Officer. He has global experience with both Procter & Gamble and GlaxoSmithKline. Used to look after the Panadol franchise. He's well placed to not only continue that solid growth in Australia, but to rapidly expand growth in the US and Canadian markets. And here's the graph of sales. You can see the graph here at bottom, rock bottom there in financial year 21. That's when the pandemic was at its worst. And I think we went from the peak of pre-pandemic of around $2.5 million in sales down to almost nothing. I think it was about $7,000. And I joined the company in June of 22, and you can see there that we'd managed to eke out a small 700,000 odd in sales, and it's been growing rapidly since. And the slope of that graph is ever increasing. So at the 9 months to March, where we've hit $3.6 million, that's up 154%. If you get your ruler out, you can see that we should comfortably exceed $4 million for the current financial year. Those full-year results will be available in sort of mid to later in July. And this is exciting. We're not only in completed phase 2 of 2 clinical programs, but Travelan, we're looking to move into phase 3 next year on the back of these results. So people that have been following Immuron for a while would know that we have run phase 2 before in a 3 times daily dosing with up to 90% efficacy and prevention of travellers' diarrhoea in placebo-controlled trials. This one was a once-a-day dosing at the request of the military. Not quite as high of primary endpoint. It hit 36%, you can see there. But what was really exciting for the Department of Defence was the secondary endpoints that they included in the study. They're looking at severe diarrhoea. They're looking at whether the troops have to get rescue antibiotics, whether the troops have to go onto IV drip. These are the big things that cause problems for them in maintaining warfighter effectiveness. And we had 66% protective efficacy against the severe diarrhoea, so a very good result. And even more importantly, a statistically significant 83% reduction in the number of subjects requiring early antibiotic treatment. And another point to note is that of those subjects requiring IV rescue therapy, all of them were on placebo and none in Travelan. And we also reduced the number of adverse events by 56%. So a great result from that phase 2 trial. Hoping to have a very good end of phase 2 meeting with the FDA with a plan to start phase 3 trials next calendar year. And here's some further details regarding IMM 529. This is our product we've developed for C. difficile infection. C. difficile infection was originally, I guess, mostly focused on hospital infections. It's moved out into the community. It's a really big problem. It's treated with antibiotics, but it doesn't last very long. A significant portion of those patients get reinfected multiple times. And so there's a high unmet need for a non-antibiotic treatment that doesn't cause antimicrobial resistance that can get to the source of that problem. And our product, we think it's the first product with a triple mechanism of action targeting not only toxin B, which is the major toxin causing C. difficile infection, but also spores and vegetative cells. And you can see down the bottom there the strong preclinical data that we have showing statistically significant prevention of primary disease, protection of disease recurrence, and treatment of primary disease. And all of those are very important. The phase 2 study that we're targeting, because it will be first time going into patients with disease, is likely to be an adjunctive therapy for recurrent disease. And on the back of that type of protocol, Lumanity estimated a market potential in the US alone of around US $100 million. So a very attractive target. And if we are able to get even 10% more patients by moving up the chain towards primary disease, that's another $48 million in sales. So a very high target market potential. I'll leave this scientific reference slide for viewers to check out for themselves, but we've got extensive preclinical and clinical research and recent publications showing the same. The one on shigellosis there that we did in monkeys, which was published just recently, is in 2023, is a good one to have a look at. Showed up to 75% effectiveness in prevention of infection by Shigella, which is a major problem in some parts of the world. So I might just hand over to you, Ryan, and let's open this up for questions. I'm sure there's quite a few there that you have.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Really appreciate the presentation. So just a reminder, I've got a couple of questions to start us off with. And then, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions you'd like me to ask Stephen, please submit them through the Q&A function. You may need to bear with me this morning. I think this is external drilling on the side of the building, which is causing a bit of chaos, but that's all right. We'll see how we go. So just to start us off, Stephen, obviously, you demonstrated your sales growth. Sales growth has been very impressive, essentially over the past 2 financial years. Should, current investors and future investors expect this to continue at the same sort of trajectories that you're projecting, or could there potentially be an increase or a decrease based on how you go with other exposing markets?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So most of the growth has come from Australia. So of that $3.6 million that we had in the 9 months, 3/4, or actually more than 3/4 of that has come from Australia. And Australia is a relatively small country by population. We're also in the US and Canadian markets. We've just relaunched in Canada. So that's a market that's slightly bigger than Australia. Similar market in that you have retail pharmacies, and we've just launched in a couple of those. So we're now into Rexall and also Sobeys, and hoping to get into the largest retail pharmacy chain within a few months. So that's quite exciting times for Canada. Hopefully we can replicate everything we've done in retail pharmacy in Australia and Canada. The largest market, of course, is the US market. And I mentioned we've launched in Amazon and also in Walmart. And we're looking to expand channels and also accelerate growth in those markets. I think there'll be a big year for US and Canada, and let's see if we can maintain that growth in Australia as well. So can we maintain the growth? Yes, I think we can do that by the same double digits. Not sure about that, but time will tell. I didn't think I'd do that last year either, but we have. So let's see how we go.
Appreciate the update, Stephen. Now, obviously, the market size for Clostridioides difficile is large. Can you tell us more about the next milestone for this clinical program?
Yeah, so you saw on the slide deck there that the total market is around $1.7 billion, and that includes those antibiotic treatments, and that's for primary treatment. I mentioned that Lumanity, the consulting group that did market research for us, estimated that we'd be around US $100 million for second recurrence in the US market alone. We've just filed that pre-IND with the FDA. The next step is that we'll have a pre-IND meeting with the FDA. They'll give us some feedback. We'll prepare a plan for protocols and clinical trials, and we'll request another meeting for them in order to discuss a phase 2 protocol. And we're planning to get that up and running probably around the middle of next calendar year. So exciting times on that program.
Yeah. Very exciting. Sorry. Now, just pivoting to a different project of yours, the IM529 C diff trial previously was plagued with difficulties, which did lead to the initial trial suspension. Essentially, from this process, what lessons were learned, and secondly, what's going to be done differently to minimise trial delays and ensure that the trial runs through to completion this time?
That's a very good question. This, of course, occurred before my time, but we always want to learn from history. So the first time that Immuron took IM529 into the clinic was with a single site with an investigator-sponsored trial in Israel. And they really struggled to recruit patients, and it took a long time to not really progress very far. And it was futile, so the company did suspend that trial. So what are we going to do differently? So this time it won't be an investigator-sponsored trial. We're going for an IND, so investigate a new drug application with the FDA, allowing us to do an FDA registration type study. We'll make sure that IND is for multi-site, not single site. Our plan is to initially start in Australia and to expand recruitment to other sites in US and Europe as necessary. And we've already started screening those sites for potential availability of patients. So we go our eyes wide open as to where we need to get patients from, how quickly we can recruit, and where to start first and where to expand to next.
Thank you for that update. I'm sure participants are going to appreciate that one. Now, just moving on, my questions are all sorted. So we move on to participant questions now. Do you see the company potentially being targeted as a takeover target by Big Pharma? And essentially, why do you think the share price continues to be so low? And furthermore, the volume on some days is essentially non-existent on the market.
Look, the volume thing's not uncommon for small biotech stocks, but yeah, when there is news. So on 7th of March, when we had top line data from the Travelan trial, we traded more than our total shares on issue. So when news does come, there's high interest, and the share price can rapidly advance on that. Those no news days in between, it's quite common for biotech stocks like ourselves to have low interest. Will Big Pharma be interested in acquiring the company? But that's certainly possible. We're hoping to take our clinical programs through to the point where they're going to say, wow, that's quite interesting. So we're just completing phase 2 now of 2 particular trials. The Campylobacter ETEC program will be the second therapeutic program, which will show some proof of concept of efficacy. Up until to date, we've only really shown that with Travelan, so IMM1240 in traveler's diarrhea, which is a relatively small market from big pharma standards. But if you can show that the technology works in more than one therapeutic, then that starts to become very interesting for them. The IMM529 for Clostridioides difficile, this is a therapeutic area that's of interest to big pharma. So those antibiotics that are sold on the market are sold by big pharma companies. The Merck has a monoclonal antibody which is in that space as well. So they could very well show an interest if we're able to demonstrate high clinical efficacy in that phase 2 study.
Thank you for that one. Now, just pivoting now to the MTEC trial. Participant asked, why was the attack rate for the MTEC trial so low? And does this render any results meaningless?
I wish we knew that this happens in controlled human infection model studies. So maybe I'll just explain for people on the call that don't know what a controlled human infection model study is. Essentially, in that the Travelan trial, we had two cohorts of 30 patients, and each patient was given a bolus of one strain of E. coli to trigger infection. And unfortunately, in some of those people in the trial, not enough of them got infected, and so that's the attack rate that the question related to. We don't know why. We've been through the age, the race, the sex, what the diet was. We've been through all sorts of factors to see whether there was some specific reason as to why the attack rate was low, but there is no cause. It's just one of those random things that happens. It doesn't render the study meaningless, but it did obviously impact our ability to get that clinically significant outcome on all of the endpoints. But importantly, we did get clinical significance on one of the secondary endpoints that's of interest to the Department of Defence, and got very close to another. And the final data that's coming out at end of July will add more colour to that, where we've done some further dissection of cohort 1 versus cohort 2, and that data is all still blinded, so I don't know what that looks like, but we'll have a lot more clarity as to what happened in that trial, as well as those additional measures that weren't available at the time of the top line results.
Okay, well, I'm sure investors will eagerly await that update. Now, just moving on quickly, would you be able to supply a tripling in demand in the next 12 months? Now, I presume this question would relate to Travelan.
Can we supply? Look, I don't see any reason why. I'd love for it to triple, and that'd be a great problem to have. So yeah, the question maybe comes because a bit over a year ago we did have supply chain issues. So we had an issue with the packaging company had decided not to continue packaging for us, and we were put into a situation where we had to quickly find another packer. We did do that, but unfortunately the TGA requirements for an overseas packer took longer than expected, and we were off the market for roughly 3 months. That's been all resolved. So we have tableting and packaging are both reliable suppliers, and I don't foresee any supply chain issues, even with the continued strong growth that we're experiencing.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that one. Now, another question we have here is, Stephen, you mentioned Shigella. Does the company have any plans to treat this condition? If not, what was the point of the animal trial?
Shigella is very much of interest to the Department of Defence. So, and we have done, I mentioned actually that monkey study in Shigella. So that preclinical study showed that Travelan itself is able to, even though the vaccines we give to the cow are for E. coli and not for Shigella. The good thing about Travelan, and there's an article in those papers that show broad spectrum activity, it works against not only E. coli, but a broad range of different pathogens. So studies that we did with Afrims in Asia showed not only Shigella, but a number of others, up to 180 different pathogens that Travelan has activity against. And so we do plan to continue looking at how to exploit that preclinical data that we have on Shigella. So there was a point to it, and it is very much of interest to the US Department of Defence. So a bit early to say what's the next step for taking that forward, but we certainly do plan to.
Okay, well, thank you for that update. Now, you did mention potentially a new product to be launched. What is the timeframe around this potential launching?
Look, we haven't signed any agreements. If we did, we would have made announcement to the market on that. But I'm hopeful in the next quarter or so we might reach agreement. And launching a product takes time, not only from a supply chain point of view, but also looking at category reviews within pharmacy chains and the like. And so, it could be 6 to 12 months more before we're actually out in pharmacy stores, but hoping to bring one of those products in the next quarter or so.
Well, thank you for that. Now, just moving on to the Arteria acquisition, I would be able to provide the market with any updates or comments about the value/use of the acquisition.
Look, we in our annual accounts in June, we'll provide an update as we're required to on the financials associated with our investment in Arteria. But Arteria is a private company, and I'm unable to provide any non-public information about that company. To the extent that they make information available, it is available on the in the UK register, so you can have a look there, or you could ask the company yourselves for comment. But I can't comment on their behalf about non-public information.
Understandable, Stephen. Thank you for that one. We've got one more question here just to finish things off. Participant asks, Stephen, thanks for the presentation. Please, could you explain this from slide 9 in a bit more detail, including the meaning of attack? So this moves back to the previous attack question.
Okay.
36.4% protective efficacy against enterotoxigenic E. coli, so ETEC, induced moderate to severe diarrhea was observed in the Travelan group compared to the placebo group, which was the primary endpoint. Even though the attack rate for this study was 37%, which was much lower than the expected 70%.
So what was the question?
The question is just they're asking a bit more detail regarding the regarding a bit more detail regarding the percentage statistics of the protective efficacy against ETEC.
Yeah, so I think where the question's coming from is saying why was the attack rate lower? So the anticipated when you work out the number of subjects for a trial, it's called power calculations, statistics, to try and get statistical significance. You have to make assumptions around certain factors, and in a controlled human infection model study, one of the primary things that you're looking at is expected attack rate, and the expected attack rate was 70%, and it was much lower than that. So it does affect the ability to get statistical significance. So we didn't get statistical significance on that primary endpoint. But what was really interesting is, notwithstanding that low attack rate, we did reach statistical significance on one of those secondary endpoints, and we got close on another, notwithstanding that much lower attack rate. But I think there'll be more clarity on all of that. I mentioned that we'll be doing a deeper dive between cohort 1 and cohort 2 in the data that we'll release around the end of July. So there'll be more clarity around that then.
Well, appreciate that clarification and update. That about wraps everything up for us, Stephen. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with?
No, but you can see here I'm being quite open to questions. So my direct email and direct phone number are available. So for shareholders and or investors who have an interest in learning more about the company or have any other questions, I'll do my best to answer them within the confines, obviously, of what I'm able to say as a publicly listed company.
Thank you very much. Now, well, Stephen, thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much, Immuron, for the opportunity to present with us. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much again. Enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers.
Very good. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.